Inside the halls of San Diego State University lies a program dedicated to storytelling and pursuing the truth. Welcome to Where You At, a podcast that takes you inside the work of alumni for the School of Journalism and Media Studies at San Diego State. Our goal is to show the success of our alumni, inspire students with the stories, and connect students and alums on a pathway to journalism success. And now, here's your host, Josh Sushan.
This week on the Where You At podcast, we're heading back east to New York City, and this week we are discussing some old-fashioned written journalism, whether that appears in a newspaper or online. We're talking about old-fashioned writing journalism, and I'm really excited. Our guest is Kayla Jimenez. She is a national correspondent for USA Today. She previously worked for the San Jose Mercury News and also for the Voice of San Diego. She covers primarily education for USA Today, although as a journalist, you end up covering a little bit of everything. I'm really interested in a lot of the stories that she's written recently. Kayla, welcome to the Where You At podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, so let's immediately begin by just kind of discussing what you do now, right? I know that as a journalist, there's no such thing as like a normal week, but take us through. How many stories are you writing or trying to write? How many different stories are you balancing, researching? Take us through what is as close can be a normal week as possible for you these days.
Yeah, so I'm a national correspondent at USA Today. And so I cover national news, mostly the American education system. So it varies each week. I'm like balancing longer term projects, shorter term breaking news stories. Recently, it's school shootings and schools not having air conditionings and COVID funding going away and bus cuts. So it's like a variety of different topics. And then there's always a one-off day where it's like covering breaking news that everyone has to jump on. So it's never boring, I'll tell you that.
When it comes to just deciding what is a national story that works, that people are going to want to read across the country? What are things that you and your editors, your other team, what are the different things that you're looking at to figure out how this story is relevant across the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always usually trend. I feel like when you're at the national level, you have to see what trends are happening across the nation. And so like for a school bus story that I wrote recently about how the school bus is kind of becoming a relic of the past, more and more schools are cutting service to students. And we saw that in Hawaii and Louisville and a lot different places of the country. So when you see like a trend like that, that usually constitutes a national story. And then like any federal policy that can impact Americans all over, that's also something.
All right, let's rewind. Let's go back to when you were first getting started at San Diego State. Tell us why you picked San Diego State and why journalism spoke to you, why you wanted to do journalism.
Yeah, I actually transferred into San Diego State my junior year, so I came in a little bit later. And I went for the journalism school, and I'm a California native, so I was attracted to the area. And then Daily Aztec became kind of one of my homes while I was there in college, so that's why I stayed. I was a news editor there, and yeah, I still have some good friends actually from that paper who I live here in New York, so we see each other often.
Was there a series of stories or any type of major story that made you just really get interested in journalism, whether you were in high school or junior high or at any point, that made you just think like, okay, I kind of want to do this. I really like this. I really like this industry.
So I knew at fifth grade that I loved to write, and I was very, since then I was like, okay, how am I going to make money off this at fifth grade? So it was like throughout the years, looking at different avenues for writing. And then I did yearbook in high school, but I actually went to Stony Brook University my first year of college, and having that base in New York, to me, I had some professors who were like covering the war in Iraq or at some of the big papers nearby. So that I think was my base. And then I kind of finished out at SDSU. So I always knew I wanted to do journalism for a while, which is, I think, rare, but people know their path. But yeah.
What were some of the biggest stories when you were on campus at the Daily Aztec? You know, take us back. I always think it's a good time capsule of like what was going on campus and the biggest stories that you remember.
I think always protests. I remember always covering some sort of protest. And actually, that was when Trump won the election, 2016. So that was a big one. I remember staying up all night in the paper, and we were like watching the voting happen and what's going to be the front cover the next day. So that was one thing. And then I covered a big when San Diego State brought on the food pantry. I wrote a lot about food insecurity on campus and the food pantry that was coming in. I also did a big project in one of my classes about professors, like the sexual assault training professors get that they usually lagged until the last month. That was a big capstone project that I did. So those are a few things.
Yeah. Tell us more about election night. Like, at least for me, I think about election night and the adrenaline of it and what's the headline going to be. There's the famous Dewey and Truman headline that was wrong. Just give us some more memories about election night and you and your coworkers, the Daily Aztec, and just that night of trying to figure out, okay, who won and how are we going to present this in the paper?
Yeah, it was chaos. It was chaos for sure. And there was like a watch party happening, I think, in the student union that we had some reporters at, and then I was back with the editors in the newsroom. But I think we had 3 covers. We had a designer make 3 covers, like a Trump one, Hillary one, and then a split. And then we ended up going with the split. I think it was like 2, if the night was going in too long. So we did that, but it was a fun time. I'll never forget where I was.
Yeah. What are some of your other just biggest, whether it was a class, a professor, classmates, just some of the most instrumental times that you remember from San Diego State, how that helped shape you?
So I talk about my capstone project on the sexual assault training professors, which I had David Cotton for my for that class, and he really helped me shape like my enterprise because my focus is writing. He really helped me shape like my enterprise writing. So that was one, and then I also had Dana Littlefield for covering courts and crime and like cities, which I really think is a fundamental skill for a journalist. And she was really like tough in a good way, like really set those skills. And so those are some memories.
When it comes to transitioning from student to professional, give us more details about how you navigated that, how you looked for jobs, how you ultimately got jobs and got going with this career.
Yeah, it was a long process, so I don't want students to be discouraged. I had 2 internships my senior year while I was working at the paper. I worked at the UT and iNewsSource for internships. And then I really wanted to stay in San Diego. And so I didn't want to get a job anywhere else. And so after my iNewsSource internship, I ended up taking on a different role. Like I was doing marketing at a fitness studio, like separately while I was looking for jobs. And then that was for a year. And then I ended up getting an internship a year after I graduated at Voice of San Diego. And I felt more like in a professional space where I didn't have to juggle school and work. And so I could really focus on it. And then I took on a big project there. And then they ended up hiring me on after that. And I was there for about 3.5 years.
What was the big project that you took on?
So when I got there was a woman, Ashley Malone. She was leaving, my coworker, she was leaving a maternity leave. But before that, she had requested all these documents as substantiated sexual misconduct from schools in San Diego County. And so when I got there as an intern, my editor said, well, we have all these documents that we were getting in, rolling in. And so we need you to look through them. So I looked through like sexual assault cases all throughout the county in schools for about 3 months. And like looked for trends, like I'm talking about before, looked for trends that were happening all over the county and ended up writing quite a few stories on that topic, and then ended up getting hired on for another year to just do that topic. So was in a lucky place where I got 1.5 years to really focus on that investigative project. And then COVID hit and we needed more people in education, like schools were closing and such. So that's how I transitioned to education full time.
If you don't mind, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the big story, because I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from that when it comes to doing a big enterprise story, especially one that's very important, but one that's also is very heavy. It's very emotional. Tell us how you start in terms of going through these documents and then, okay, what are the next steps? Who do I need to call? And then how do we start to take all of these documents and mix it with interviews so that it become this series of stories?
Yeah. So I was a young journalist. It was like almost 8 years, 9 years ago. So it was coming in fresh. And these are some skills. I'm glad you asked me because I wish I had learned them in college, but I did. You also learn on the job.
Mhm.
So I was reading through a lot of court documents, which is, I think, a big skill that I learned during that time. A lot of court documents and like different student stories, and reaching out to school districts and asking them for contacts and then looking for student contacts. But I think like the biggest thing that we found was that teachers, when there's a sexual assault or sexual misconduct case on campus, and I was reporting on teacher on student assault, sometimes they do end up getting fired for the misconduct, but then either their credential is or not revoked, and then a lot of them end up going to different school districts because there's like back discrepancies in background checks. But like that trend, and just seeing that teachers that were punished for this misconduct were going to different school districts, it kind of illuminated this path. So we reported on like this trend of teachers being able to get new jobs even after they had committed these abuse. Some were crimes and some were grooming instances. So it was really emotional. I would tell you that. Emotional, though, like interviewing subjects that have been through this kind of abuse, a big learning lesson for me.
Those are tough interviews. Those are really important interviews. And I don't know if it's really hard to get trained to do things like that. And you mentioned how it's a lot of on-the-job training. What were some of the emotion that you wanted to convey when you're talking to a victim? What did you do, and what are the different things that you've learned over the years in these really emotional, heavy conversations?
At the time, I remember thinking, I think when you're taught as a journalist, you have to be hard. Let's get the story, let's get the information. And I think that applies when you're talking to like politicians or public figures, with people that have been through like traumatic events or just normal people in the streets. You have to approach it differently. So with these, it's usually student victims. It was young people. It was always treating it like this was their story to tell, and it was like a privilege to tell their story. So I did sit down with them for hours. There was one man that I sat down with for a month, and we would get coffee regularly, and like he built up the trust to tell me his story. But I think, yeah, in this case, you can't assume that someone was going to hope that they want to talk to you and try to build that conversation and bring empathy to it. But yeah, you have to work to build trust in a lot of these to get these stories. So it's on the job. I think you learn how to do it along the way.
What's the level of satisfaction when you have finished reporting and the stories are out there and you know that you told these stories for these victims? Just the level of satisfaction that you feel in being a journalist and being able to do this.
It is rewarding. I think when you publish a story that's very controversial, you're going to get hate from multiple angles, or like you have people upset about the story. You have people from the school district upset that you wrote the story, and then the person is upset. And then, so you're dealing with a lot of emotions at the time. But I think in the years later, I've seen like laws being passed because of the reporting. The San Diego Unified School District is now under like federal. They went through this federal investigation, and the OCR has told them that they need to change all of these laws. So it's a long time coming, I think, the reward of it. But it is nice to obviously like publish a story that you've been working on for so long.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you didn't want to leave San Diego, but you did. You worked for San Jose Mercury News and now USA Today. So tell us about just decision-making on when it's time to go on to the next assignment, the next job, and how you basically have gone from the next stages of your career.
Yeah, I think when it's time to grow, when there's the next step for you. That's when I knew I wanted to do statewide reporting when I left San Diego. And so my role at the Mercury News was education, but I was doing California-wide reporting. And then I was also I specialized in trend stories because of that project. So it was easy for me to transition and find different trends that were happening in California. And I was doing a lot of data work there. And that was during COVID. That was really the COVID closure time and coming out of that. And then I was there for almost a year, and then I got the opportunity at USA Today, and then I couldn't turn that down. So yeah. And then I've been doing national news since.
Tell us more about the data work. I think that data journalism is really interesting when you can put when you can quantify different things. Give us some examples of whether it's a story or just something that you enjoyed digging into the data to find out what is actually happening here.
I think we found that there were discrepancies, like racial discrepancies in COVID testing. There was a lot of COVID reporting at the time. The way that COVID tests were distributed to schools, but that was even a numbers story. And then another one that's even happening now is so many kids are moving out of the Bay Area because of the prices, and during COVID that schools were facing enrollment declines and moving into homeschools or charter schools or different options. So I think the enrollment declines has been actually a really big story in California. School enrollment declines that has gone to the national level, but that was all using the California like database, the Ed Department's database. So there's a lot that you can report on just like digging through a database. I was working alongside a data reporter and we had a good partnership. So I feel like when you have that, it's telling stories through numbers are rewarding to like combine the numbers and then the anecdotes and interviews from people.
Yeah, I feel like journalism is just so much better when you have a partner that you can work with together, because I think it's like, wait, am I seeing this trend right? Or are you seeing this, and being able to bounce ideas off each other? I think that the teamwork there makes that really good, because let's face it, it can be really boring going through the numbers and like trying to figure out what do these numbers mean. So I think that's really cool that you did that with a coworker. Yeah, if there's anything that you want to elaborate on that in terms of just like how that comes together as teammates, basically.
Mm-hmm. I think that's working collaboratively is a big part of newsroom setting. Like when you get higher up, and it's like something also that I don't think you're trying to taught on the job, but I think it's usually using each other's skills. Like I worked with my coworker Harriet, and she's amazing at data and numbers and Excel sheets. I, on the other hand, am like good at interviewing and telling a story and having that make sense to a broader audience. So bringing your skills together is really important, and then you can like back check each other. It's like, wait, did I write actually that the enrollment declined in this area? And then she would say, wait, actually it stayed stable, so we're like back checking each other, which is always good because we want the most factual stories.
Let's talk a bit more about USA Today. That's where we started. Let's circle back to there now. I really enjoyed the story that you wrote recently about cell phones in schools and should they be banned. And like as a reader, I saw the headline and I went, yes, they should not be distracted while they're in school. Ban the cell phone. And then I read your story and it was really nuanced. I really enjoyed the different perspectives. Give us a little bit more background about just how that idea gets flushed out with the different interviews in order to write what I thought was a really interesting, compelling piece.
Yeah, thank you. I think nuance is always at the top of my mind every time I'm approaching any story, because I want to have all perspectives in a smart way. I think the conversation around cell phones in schools has been around forever, maybe since I was in school. And so it was just bringing a different perspective. The cell phone debate is a hot topic because parents are concerned about school shootings and school safety and want to have access to their kids on their phones. And at the same time, teachers are policing phones if kids are scrolling throughout the day. And then on the other hand, experts are saying, well, kids who don't have MacBooks or access to other electronic devices use their cell phones for homework or different things. And they could be taught in a productive way in the classroom. So that topic is it's a hot debate. So I think it's important to bring all of these perspectives to light so readers can also make the decision for themselves about what they think.
Yeah, and the other thing that I remember thinking as I finished reading your story was that, well, now I don't know what I think, but that's okay, right? Because it's not, journalism is not about like pounding someone over the head about like, this is what you must do. It's
right.
That these are the different perspectives and these are the different things that are at stake.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that becomes lost so often. It's that everyone just wants, okay, so what's the answer? And sometimes the answer is, here are the different, it's for you to fill out the answer.
Let you think about it. Yeah. Right.
Other stories that you've written at USA Today, whether it's recently or during your time there that you're proud of, or you think that we can learn from what you did in order to find that story?
I did a big project after national numbers showed that students were declining, like in math and reading after COVID. The report from the education department showed that eighth graders and fourth graders scored on the decline, and those are the two groups that take these tests. And then so I went to my editor and said, hey, what if we get into some of these classrooms and see if they're actually doing well? Because the education department was pressing teachers and saying, we have to recover this year. I think this was 2022, 2023, or the year before. This is the year we have to recover. We're giving you all this money, this COVID funding relief to do this. So we have to get back. And then so we ended up doing that project, and I followed two classrooms in Richmond, California, which is near Oakland. And then my coworker followed two classrooms on the East Coast for 6 months. And I spent months in the classroom, like visits to the classrooms, talking to teachers, talking to students, talking to parents about everything that was going on. And in conclusion, school wasn't getting back to normal. Schools were dealing with absenteeism, and students were mentally not well. Like sixth graders were learning phonics and fourth graders were learning multiplication. So like they were very behind. And then so it was just like tracking that school year and having that time to really talk to parents and talk to students about how it was impacting them. That was significant to me. But we ended up publishing that a year or two ago.
How do you end up picking the cities? Like and how do you get permission to be inside the classroom? I think this is really interesting. Why Richmond, California? And then who has to sign off on you saying like, okay, you can be in class to follow and to watch what's happening here?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think it took me about 3 months to get into classrooms. So trying to convince the spokesperson, like, this is really important. This is really important. Yeah. It was largely based on where we were, but also California, like Virginia was doing much worse than California. So it was also comparing the two based on their test results to see like would one state do better than the other. And then so I was based in the Bay Area at the time. And so I did these two classrooms in Richmond, which were in low income communities. But yes, I had to try to convince the principal and the superintendents. I think it was 3 months that both of us had to like build trust and access to get in.
Do you remember the first day that you went inside the classroom? Was there a teacher who's, hey, this is Kayla. She's from USA Today, and she's going to be hanging out with us. And it's just sort of the curiosity and basically how you develop rapport and trust with students and teachers.
I think you have to go in being as friendly as possible. Like you're an intruder to their classroom also. Yeah, but then you become part of it over time. So it's interesting. It was fourth graders, so they're not familiar with USA Today. when I told them I'm on TikTok, then that's when they're like, oh my gosh, you're on TikTok. That's when they thought it was cool. I think just talking to them at their level, like we're not asking. I'm just like, how's school going? How's homework going? How's practice? It's not like the data is declining, and how do you feel about this and this? You have to just stoop to their level and be a human. And I think that really helped me. But yeah, the teachers were welcoming to me. I was following one teacher who was really advanced. She had been there for like decades, and then another teacher who had been there for only 2 years. So it's good to just get different perspectives.
Not that it matters too much, but I'm curious, after all of as long as it took to get the permission, once the story comes out, what's the feedback that you ended up hearing from that school?
Yeah, it was mixed reviews. I think it's interesting because you become a part of the classroom in a way, but you're still a reporter that has to report on all the nuances that are going on. So I think that's something that you have to accept when you're going into a community and also trying to tell that story to a national audience. So good and bad. And I mean, mostly the truth. Like everyone knew what I was going to publish. I think before you publish a big project, you tell them every single thing. Like, am I right? Am I right on this? Am I right on that? And then they know what's going to happen. But I think even the parents were surprised because they weren't in the classroom with me. So when I would tell them what was happening, they were surprised. Like, did your junior student is not turning in their homework, or they're not doing well in class? And they're like, I didn't know that. And so I learned also a lot about what parents don't know. So that was part of it. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Okay, we're going to start to wrap things up here, but I got a couple more topics that I wanted to get to. Just in terms of try to make this as educational as possible for students who are studying journalism now, or just for other journalists to kind of learn. I like to call it the journalistic tool bag, right? You have all these different tools as a journalist. What are Whether that's data, whether that's being there in person, whether that is phone calls, just all these different journalistic tools, which you can find on social media versus what's just old fashioned reporting. What are the trends in terms of the best journalism tools to help you find and get the best stories these days, Kayla?
Building trust with the people that you're covering and enough for them to give you tips and exclusives on stories that no one else is covering. And then I think being at the same drum. When I was covering that sexual assault project, I only was able to build rapport and trust because I kept reporting on it. And so I became like a trusted source for those stories. And now I am for education stories that have been all over. But I think it's being reliable and getting back to people and keeping connections with people over years. There's people that I talked to from that project that was 8 or 9 years ago that I still talk to. So that's one thing. And then data, I'm not the best at math, but I got better because I had to. So I think data is a big one. And yeah, following the money, as they say, following numbers. Yeah, those are two of my big ones.
When it comes to promoting your stories, getting those out there, do you have a personal philosophy in terms of this is how I go about sharing my stories on social media? Does USA Today have any like strong recommendations? Like what's just your philosophy on I've written this story and I want to get it out there, and how do you go about doing that?
This is a good question. I think it varies. I used to, now that I have a national audience with it, we have a whole social media team, a whole team doing it. I don't put as much focus on it, but I do share on all of my social media platforms and then with my sources, and my sources get back to me. We have conversations about my stories when they publish. And then I have done some, and usually USA Today runs this. I do some TikTok videos or like podcast appearances. And also I do a lot of moderating panels and like talking about my stories in person at different events, which I think it has also, when you are a face in kind of the community or in these spaces where sources will want to talk to you, that's a big part of it as well. So getting your name out there as well as your stories is part of it.
I like it. I like it all, Kayla. This is great. We like to close out the podcast by bragging about other San Diego State alums who are making us proud. You can brag about as many as you want. So floor is yours. Who else do you want to shout out who's making us proud out there from San Diego State?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, Adriana Haldiz, she was a big part of that project of Voice of San Diego with me, her and Megan Wood. Megan Wood is also SDSU. She also helped me with that project. We worked together on it at San Diego State. And then now Jamie Ballard and Will Fritz and I we're pretty close in the Daily Aztec newsroom, and we even get coffee sometimes here in New York. So everyone I worked with at the Daily Aztec was really instrumental to my journalism career, and we still keep in touch. So I would recommend always keeping college connections because they'll come in handy throughout life and become good friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And almost all of those names that you just mentioned have also been a previous guest on this podcast as well. So
Amazing.
That makes me good to know that that I'm continuing to follow the right trends as well in terms of talking to the right people. So this was great, Kayla. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all of your the story behind the story, which I really appreciate. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for appreciating writing. Still, it's becoming a lost art, but it's going online. It's going digital, so it's good.
Yeah, I love old-fashioned written journalism. Yeah. So once again, her name is Kayla Jimenez. She is a national correspondent for USA Today. My name is Josh Sushan. I'm the host of the Where You At podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Devin Watley from the class of 2021. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know where you're at. Tell us about your career. Get involved in the school. There's many ways you can do this, from donating your time or money, mentoring students, to even speaking in classrooms in person or on Zoom. Your work can help us grow the program and create more opportunities for our students to succeed. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. recommend us a future guest, and go Aztecs.